this is in regards to GST and how it has impacted pricing within Malaysia. So how this forum is going to work is it's going to be divided into 3 segments. The first segment really is just to give a brief background on what GST is. The second segment will talk about how GST has impacted each individual's businesses. Just to give a little background on pricing strategies, what happened, is there a compression in margins. And the final segment is actually open for everyone to ask a question. Okay, so we'll start with the first segment. Just a brief background about GST. And our estimated time, just so you guys will know, we're going to finish this thing by 9 o'clock. Okay, so the first segment. A little bit or a background of GST. The nation has introduced the GST on the 1st of April, as everyone knows. And to date, there's about 160 countries which are currently implementing the GST. So GST really is tax on consumption. Prior to this, there were a lot of leakages in terms of tax. So you can actually see a lot of rich people buying luxurious cars, driving, using subsidized oil. So essentially what happens is the subsidies actually goes sometimes towards the richer people. With the GST, it's a much more fairer way of charging tax, and hence the government has actually introduced GST so that if the rich were to consume and buy more expensive items, they will get taxed even higher. So another reason why GST was introduced was to reduce the reliance on oil and gas revenues. As we know, oil prices actually came down quite significantly, and Malaysia is one of the top gas producers in the world. So with the reduction of oil and gas prices, it was high time that I guess the government introduced the GST to the nation. So I concluded segment number 1. We're going to move towards segment number 2. I guess for you guys, Mr. Leonard, could you give like a brief introduction about GST and how it impacted your business so far, and moving forward, are you guys going to take in the cost, and in terms of pricing, what's your pricing strategy so far post GST?
Okay, thank you very much. Declare my conflict of interest first and foremost. I'm actually pro-GST, so just in case anybody wants to know where my argument, but why, but the more important thing is why pro-GST. I think most of you are going to go into the workforce, and you're most likely going to be a taxpayer. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, only about 15% of the 15 to 20% of the working population actually pays taxes at all. So you do find after a while that there's a disproportionate amount of subsidy being paid by the 20% to fund activities in Malaysia, be it capital development or with operating expenditure. So I think the GST as a consumption tax is a fairer tax system. Okay, 160 countries around the world cannot possibly be wrong. But I must say, I'm really surprised at some of the things I see on Facebook. Not that I rely on Facebook, but I must say, every time you click like, be very careful you know what you're clicking like to. Because some of the arguments are so preposterous on Facebook. When you click like, what does it mean? You agree, right? And then what does it say about you when it's a totally preposterous argument? And there's a lot that's floating around at the moment. And I think the important thing for you're at master level degree program holders, it's better to have a more intellectual discourse about the issue rather than to have an emotional discourse about the issue. Now, we can argue as to whether is 6% the right number? Should it be 5? Should it be 8? Or should it be 12? If you go to the UK or France at the moment, it's something like 15 or 18%, I believe. or 17th, or you just come back from France and this is your LP rebate. So you can have that sort of argument. What is the right sum? Okay, I'll talk about GST at two levels. One on a personal basis, and secondly from the company perspective. On a personal basis, my taxes for 2015 is going to come down by 1% effective from income earned in January 2015. My GST impact is only going to hit me in terms of pricing I pay for my consumption from 1st of April. Now my reduction in my personal tax rate is 1%. My increase in cost, and anybody who tells you there will be no increase in cost with GST, especially in the initial periods, has not seen the experience in all other countries. There is, but it stabilizes. Now you have to understand the reason why a lot of retailers, and I shouldn't be saying in front of you, so, but for a lot of retailers, when you have 27,000 SKUs in a shop, you're not going to read price every. Okay, so how they do it, there will be a transient period. But I personally think that based on my consumption, I'm going to be net positive. Not because I'm spending less, but I think the 1% reduction in my taxes will compensate what additional prices I may pay in my first year. Come year 2 of GST, I think everybody is going to have to accept the fact that it's a fairer tax system. It's broader based, and hopefully, I know just now you mentioned something about income generating. I think the GST was never intended to raise income to compensate for drop in subsidy. Okay? In fact, right at the beginning, GST was mentioned to be neutral, revenue neutral for the government. In other words, whatever they're giving up in sales tax, etc., they will get the equivalent. But there is a very large percentage, or there's a large value of undeclared income in this country, untaxed income. If you talk to people from Bank Negara, they tell you it's almost as large as 40 billion a year. These are people who have 40 billion of profit not paying taxes on. So a consumption tax is more all-encompassing and will capture. So on a personal basis, I'm pro-GST. I think this year at least I woke up ahead. If I don't change my consumption pattern, hopefully next year I will work out neutral. From a company perspective, it depends very much on whether you like GST or not. Will be dependent upon what your status was prior to 1st of April. Okay. We have 3 businesses at CCM, a chemicals business, a fertilizer business, and a pharmaceutical business. The chemicals and fertilizers are all standard rated. Now the 3 terms you have to understand about GST: standard rated, zero rated, and exempt. Okay? The last thing you want to be is exempt. Okay, because you cannot pass on your GST, but you still have to bear your GST behind you. Zero rated, you don't pass it on, but you can collect back. Standard rated, you pass it on and you collect back. You're probably an expert, but I give you my basic understanding about it. Now, fertilizer chemicals, no issue. All products are standard rated, no big deal. I get input. There's certain GST I'll be paying on my raw materials, and I'll be passing on, and I'll be paying effectively 6% on the margin that I make, or the value add that I make. Okay, which is fine. Corporate tax comes down, I believe, soon, or has already. So I think net I'll be in the same position. Pharmaceuticals GST is a real pain in the backside, I must tell you. Okay, why? My personal view is GST should have been applied across everything equally at the same percentage. Then it becomes an easy tax to implement. In pharmaceuticals, I suddenly have what grew from a list of 1,700 essential medicines that were supposed to be zero rated. It then grew to a list of 3,400 medicines, zero rated. And then it suddenly grew to 5,800 a week before implementation of GST. Okay? It took us 90 man-days worth of programming to program our system for all the pharmaceuticals. 90 man-days. Okay? And to make it worse, I supply to government, I supply to private sector. So government doesn't have to pay GST, private sector does have to pay GST. So that's another dimension. So it's become extremely complicated for us to actually build in GST into the pharmaceutical sector. Now, the government's been very nice, giving a lot of zero rated, but it's been a real pain for us because for us to reprogram our system every time there's a change in classification is very, very difficult. So, take for example, paracetamol. Paracetamol, most of you will hear about Panadol. Why is it 500 mg strength is zero rated, 650 mg strength is not zero rated? I have to pay 6%. Okay? And this is what happens when you start playing around to cater for public sentiment. Now all this was, the zero rated was all due to public sentiment. So who shouted loudest got a zero rating. Not, I mean, I'm simplifying it, but it made it very, very complicated in terms of implementing. For us, as a policy, as I said, you know, as long as we get the benefit on the tax side, we personally don't think GST will have an impact on our profitability as a company. Okay? Not in the first year anyway. And after 1 year, people get used to it, it just becomes yet another tax. But I think in pharmaceuticals, where the impact really hits is prior to 1st of April. Not many people know this, but the pharmaceutical industry paid no import duty on its equipment. It paid no sales tax on the products that it was supplying. So for our industry, this tax is new. It's not replacing a sales tax. It's a new tax for the pharmaceutical. And I think that's one of the reasons why the government has been bringing down quite a lot of items to make it zero rated. But having said that, pricing-wise, it hasn't really affected us. We're still early days. Our first submission will be end of May. And I think my accountants are printing out what we call a Form 3 report, where we look at how much input, how much output taxes, and we're trying to see, to make sure we're up to date in terms of the submission of our taxes by the end of May. But having said that, like I said, at the end of the day, 160 countries cannot possibly be wrong. It's about right about it. It's just the question now is how we implemented that. Those are the pains that we're going through at the moment.
Thank you so much. Okay, and the second question is for Mr. Nickson. This actually comes from talking to the MBA students for the past 1-2 weeks. I talked to my economist, in fact. He told me that when there's an implementation of GST, certain sectors within the industries will suffer, while certain industries within the sectors will actually benefit. So I asked my economist, I said, benefit? How do you mean? And he told me, guys like the tax agents would actually benefit the most. I guess for the benefits for the MBA student over here, what's, in your opinion, what sectors will benefit? And if one of these MBA students wants to be a tax agent, assuming, what do you look at when you hire a candidate?
Very loaded question. Okay, yes, I think what Anand mentioned is true. GST is actually a blessing for a lot of the advisory firms. Because GST is so new, everyone looks towards consultants like ourselves for advice. So when the government or Najib first announced that GST is going to be implemented in October 2013, all of us got excited, of course, and then we then say, okay, let's educate ourselves because they will need advice. And we then look around our country and say, who has such experiences? In Singapore, GST was implemented 20 years ago. So our colleagues in Singapore all have left. No one we could go to ask for advice or to guide us. The nearest country that we could go to was actually Australia, which was also 10 years back, right? And we did send a team down there, and they actually did give some advice and so forth. But again, our GST system is a bit unique. It's not a carbon copy of any country. It's actually a hybrid of 4 different countries: New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, and UK, right? right? So we have a bit of everything. So it makes it a bit difficult to actually implement it really. I just wanted to just clarify that my role was actually to help companies like CCM or many other countries to actually put that system in place so that at the end of May, you'll be able to churn out what we call the GST 03 form that shows how much output tax minus off in input tax, how much you pay, right? And this then rolls backwards to try and identify what kind of sales you make, whether it's zero rated, exempt rated, out of scope, or standard rated, right? And this is actually what I do for the past 1.5 years. Going back to the question, yes, audit firms, consulting firms like myself, we actually benefited. It's like Y2K to us. If you all remember what Y2K was, right? Yeah. About 15 years back, there was this thing called Y2K where they say the system will crash, the sky will fall down from the sky, because if you don't fix your computer. Same thing here, to us as a consulting firm, it's the same. They needed help, right? And the people they come to were people like us. So sector that actually benefited, yes, audit, tax, consulting firm. Software houses benefited tremendously. If you look at IFCA share prices, went up to the roof. IFCA is actually the software provider for property developer and some hotelers as well. So companies needed a software system to be able to track each and every one of these transactions, because to try and do it manually, no more. So all the small SMEs, companies need to put in place an accounting system which is GST compliant going forward, right? So to go back to the question, what do you want to do? The good news is GST is here to stay. Once we go on this path, there's no turning back. And it's a good system really. So we should start off with a quick survey. How many of you guys think GST is good? Hands up. How many of you say it's not good? Oh yes, opposition. Okay, let me try and summarize based on 1.5 years experience of what we see. GST is actually good for business. If you are in the standard rated industry, it's actually good. What you could not claim previously under the sales and service tax regime, like your lawyer's fees, or your sales tax or service tax that's incurred, you can now claim in the GST era. Okay, and that helps reduce down costs. But GST is actually bad for consumer. You and I, we're gonna end up paying more because as a consumer we can't claim back anything, right? So our price actually goes up. But to us, GST is actually a fairer system, like what Leonard mentioned just now. It's very true. There's only a certain percentage of our population that pay tax. People who come from Singapore to shop in Malaysia during weekend, so they don't pay any taxes. We have workers foreign workers, which is a lot. They come here and to work. They don't pay tax. Right, we have illegal immigrants who come here, Indonesians who come here to work and construction site. They don't pay taxes at all, so they don't contribute back to our economy. With GST, it's a consumption tax. So whatever you consume, you actually indirectly pay taxes to help the economy. And as accounting students, you know that in businesses in Malaysia, they have 3 sets of books. One for auditors, one for your own, one to be reported, and so forth. Right. There is a lot of leakages in the system. With a GST framework, you can't hide anymore. So it's good. People are starting to declare their true revenue and pay their true taxes that should be paid based on the profit that they are making. Which you will notice, that's why in the first 3 months, there's a lot of companies shut down. Not because they can't do business, because they want to cut off and start fresh again. You see new companies being formed, right? Same people, because with a GST, they know they can't hide their profit anymore, right? Which is good for the economy, for you and I, And in a way, prices do fall. Car prices are cheaper right now, right? So that's good news in a way. Message in disguise. But not all car prices drop tremendously. I heard there's 140 ringgit only, so don't go out there and shop straight away. Keep the money, right? Sectors and suffer, right? As you know, there are 4 types of price that you make: standard rated, zero rated, exempt rated, and out of scope. So like what Mr. Leonard mentioned, if you are in an exempt category, that sector actually suffers, because if you are in an exempt category, you don't charge people GST, neither can you claim back the input tax that you incurred. So industry like property developer, public transportation, financial institutions, general insurance, life insurance, and the other one, medical, even education side, they are in the exempt category. That will suffer a bit because their cost of doing business will go up, right? And therefore, that's why you will notice that there will be price increase in those sectors. So yes, if you're planning a career to join an audit firm like ours, a consulting firm like us, yes, you need to learn up fast about GST. Because even after post-GST, there will be tremendous amount of work. It will take about 2 years for this GST regime to stabilize, and then people start to accept GST as part and parcel of their life. There's still a lot of work to be done. Like for us, we go into companies post-GST looking at how we can help you maximize your input tax claiming. Because sometimes, if you are not aware of how the system works, then you may not be able to maximize. Input tax is good for business. Remember, I mentioned that GST is good because every $1 that you can claim back is $1 to your bottom line. So as an organization, we must try and maximize that as much as we can. And also because the penalty for GST is quite severe. Just imagine if you file an inaccurate GST form, or you didn't declare that, it could go up to a maximum of 50,000 or 3 years jail sentence. You steal from the bank also not so severe, right? but that is a penalty for GST. So every company needs help to make sure that they are in compliance with the GST law, part of that, right?
Thank you. I guess, Mrs. Low, I have a question for you. With the GST being implemented, I'm sure there's a lot of confusion. Looking at the Australian experience, I did some reading. There were some companies which actually were suspected profiteering. For the Malaysian experience, say assuming one of us were to go to a shop, how do we detect a company profiteering? More for a layman's perspective, then if it does happen, what can we do as consumers to, I guess?
Okay, thank you. Alright, good evening everybody. Okay, I think you've heard from Leonard, you've heard from Nickson. I think a lot of consumers, you and I, we're all consumers, we all always feel that GST is a disadvantage to us. Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah, because we have to pay tax now for everything that we buy, almost everything I should say, except for certain zero-rated goods. We feel the pinch directly, but of course there is also this issue that previously there might be embedded sales tax which we actually can't detect. But going very direct to Anand's question about how as consumers do you detect whether there's profiteering, actually you can't actually detect directly, but as consumers I always advise, as we are normal buyers or purchasers in every way, whether it's essential goods or our normal shopping, you actually know the prices, right? When you know your prices, then price increase will be the trigger for any consumer to actually look at whether it can be a profiteering issue. But as consumers, the only thing that consumers can do is actually to forward complaints to the ministry. So there onwards, that's when we come in to enforce the price control and anti-profiteering law, the price control and anti-profiteering Act 2011. So if you're talking about whether you yourself as a consumer can detect profiteering, then I would honestly say that it's not possible. Because as we go along, the consumers also ask us how are they going to find out whether a piece of product that is in the market is overpriced. So it's basically the bottom line is the price of the goods that are being sold. There's such thing as a consumer, smart consumer. We always propagate that it's smart, that you actually make your price comparison. So that is how you exercise your right as consumer. The rest of it is our job in the ministry. So when I talk about profiteering, it's considerably new for the ministry or for the government to enforce. It is something that I think I would say not many countries, I would have said that no country does it actually for profiteering. But going back to what Leonard has said, Nickson has said, Australia was an example that we benchmarked. We went down to Australia to study their law as well as how they implemented GST and how they curbed price exploitation. That was in the year 2000, so we're talking about 15 years gap, between what Australia did and what we're doing now. But the basic principle we adopted from Australia as to how we're going to tackle profiteering in relation to GST. We have an old act previously, which is a Price Control Act 1946, and eventually we actually redrafted the act. We are the administrating ministry. So what we did was we put in a new section or a new part to the act on profiteering. But the provisions has got offense because we wanted to capture profiteering, but then we also need a mechanism. Because we cannot plainly say that anybody just profiteer. What do you mean by profiteering? But the Act has interpretation to say that profiteering is when you're making a profit that's unreasonably high. Then the question comes back to us, what is unreasonably high? So there's always this question that will say, please tell me what is unreasonably high. If I go to a company now, you will ask me, how will you enforce it against me? Can you tell me at what juncture do I profiteer? So having said that, then we have to come up with a regulation. So that's what we have done so far. So as of 1st of January, actually we have a regulation in place, but there are also certain provisions that was amended in the main act to make sure that the input tax benefit, that is the claim back, is also going to be an offense if a certain company does not factor it out as their cost. Because the input taxes, I think very clearly was put just now, it's not a cost to the business, okay? Because they can claim it back. So under our act, there's a very direct provision. There's a section 10A that actually says when you don't put in, when you claim your input tax, you do not factor it out as your cost, it's an offense. So that is number one. That's how we enforce profiteering. In that sense, the input tax component. Then there's also this sales tax refund component which a certain company can claim. Yeah? That is part of the system in the GST Act. If there is a claim made for the sales tax refund, for the sales tax that's already paid for your goods until 31st of March, if there's a claim back, then it also has to be reduced accordingly in terms of revising the prices. That means it has to be 10% or 5% sales tax that was previously paid on manufactured goods will have to be factored out. Then only you put back the 6%. So by doing that, that mechanism was its intention to actually make sure that there will be some form of price revision that benefits the consumer in a reasonable manner, by taking into consideration that there are all these concessions and of special sales tax refund, and also the input tax credit in the GST system itself. So by looking at GST's model, we actually have the provisions in place. But then again, coming back to the regulation itself, we actually have to determine what do you mean by profiteering. So that's when this regulation that we have came in 1st of January 2015, it was enforced. So which is actually quite a mouthful if I were to tell you, is price control and anti-profiteering mechanism for determining unreasonably high profit, net profit margin 2014. But this particular regulation actually has got implication on businesses to have to maintain or rather fix their profit margin for their product for a period of 18 months, starting from 2nd of March till next year, 2016, 30th of June. But what is the comparison? The comparison of the net profit margin for us would be, if the net profit margin of a product means I'm talking about a single item per unit, exceeds the net profit margin for the same product is higher on 1st January compared to 1st January, then it becomes an offense for profiteering. So basically we are asking businesses to not adjust their net profit margin after 1st January. If not, then it will constitute an offense under profiteering. But then we are not saying that you can't raise your prices, because we know for a fact that pricing is dynamic. We do not fix the margin or the profit margin of a product, but the company or the businesses themselves determine their own profit margin, but just keep it in the level as at 1st of January for the next 18 months. But there will be a pre and a post GST formula if you look at the regulation. Because the pre-period, you will find that there is no input and output tax element, and even the special sales tax refund element. Whereas after 1st April, they will be factored in input tax, output tax, and sales tax refund. The basic component of determining the net profit margin would be the cost of goods and also the operational cost. The selling price, taking away from selling price, then you deduct the cost of goods. This is just basic. The formula is very basic. So we are keeping it very open so that each company has got the room, not to manipulate, but the room to work in the factor according to your own pricing practice as how it is going to be managed. And but of course, for us, after 1st April, we have to factor in the sales tax refund, the input tax credit, and the output tax. So if you look at the formula, it is quite a lot of people when they look at it, they say it looks like maths. But that's the way we have to draft it in that manner, because that's the requirement of drafting by Attorney General's office. So we work accordingly. But how do we actually implement it? Of course, we have to try and make businesses understand that whatever they are doing is to make sure that the basic rule is do not exploit GST and raise price indiscriminately. Yeah? That's the bottom line of it. So that formula is actually for us to do enforcement and to actually take action if it's necessary. But the intention actually is really not to penalize. We have it in place to make sure that if companies can understand that these are the requirement of pricing without manipulating or exploiting GST, then basically it can be translated into fair pricing for consumers. So compliance is actually our main intention. But of course now with only GST, today is 29, okay, it's almost a month, but tomorrow you're on the 30th day. There is mounting pressure from a lot of, I think all over the country, especially from the ministry who has to take care of consumers' interests. I think everybody is feeling that price increase happening. We were just discussing before we came in. We said, I think managing the big companies might not be that difficult, but managing the petty traders can be a problem for us. In the sense that they don't have good record keeping. There are too many, and they do have this practice whereby they just add on the prices. Sometimes maybe due to cost increase, we're not sure. But there is this practice going on roughly at the retail, small petty traders level, and we're receiving some complaints on that. But generally what we do is we do our normal enforcement. Now we are trying to beef up, we are going on the ground to make sure that prices are being put up, like price list, price tagging, all in order. But in terms of price increase, then we really have to check and force them to declare their status as to how they come to the pricing. But there are some actions taken on some retailers already. We also issue notices to get justification. We are receiving a lot of feedback that from our branches that some are not replying. So those are the non-compliance that we are working upon. So in terms of taking action, enforcement, we are doing it. But I think at the end of the day, it's still very much on how consumers can exercise your right. We have complaints saying that price increase, but I mean the eating out habits are still there. You know, we really can't manage it if the consumer behavior continues to be as it is now. But on the other hand, we also hear people who sometimes I have friends telling me, it's good, GST has forced me to eat at home. Because now when I go and eat out, I find that I have to pay so much more. So these are the things that I'm not sure how you as consumers are managing it, but I eat out because I don't cook. So I would pay GST whether I like it or not. So in terms of enforcement, we are trying to do it, but you will see some action taken. We have taken some action, but you see some result coming out in terms of prosecution and all in court to serve as a deterrent for other businesses. But we are not sure how this is going to work. It's so new. We hope that if business can understand that no price exploitation by looking at the provisions of the Profiteering Act, then prices should at least stay. Then we hope that it won't contribute a lot to CPI increase, which is estimated around maybe 1 or 2% from the present one. But I'm not sure how it will look in terms of the next few months. We get to see. But we are receiving a lot of complaints and mounting pressure for ministry to take action. So we will institute some action, but how strong it will bring the message across to the businesses, we have yet to see. So maybe in terms of enforcement, that's what we are doing. We've got about 2,000 home officers, but we have something like 5 to 6 million registered businesses. So if you want the officers to be always on the ground, it will be impossible actually. So it's a lot of self-regulatory thing by the businesses that we hope to achieve through the regulation that we put up. Thank you.
Do you need any more enforcement officers?
So we hope to get more, but if JPA can give us more officers, we'd love to have them. But you know, we do have problem with staffing, alright?
Okay, so thank you so much for everyone's explanation. Right now we open the session to the third segment whereby everyone can ask a question. So if anyone were to kind of put up their hands and ask a question, we'd be more than grateful.
Sorry, just to ask something. Just try to understand whereby in our GST regime we actually divided into standard rated, zero rated exam. And some of the industries are actually categorized under the exempt supply category. For example, private hospital, private education like private college, and as well as the property developer for the residential properties. Also, eventually what happens is that they may not be able to pass on the GST cost, but they can increase the price. And eventually, because of this happen, and I would say this industry are anyway still very much popular, not being competitive enough, so they will not be able to stay on the price, and then so that they can stay competitive. They do not need to do that. So eventually, what they do is that they pass on the cost by increasing the price. So I just wanted to understand at the first place, why are they being put under exempt supply instead of zero rated maybe? Thank you.
You should have the GST guys here. That's actually not my favorite. I can see. I'm probably I miss a little bit. Are you actually talking about health services? You're talking about all the exempt supply.
Yeah, maybe just some of the indicators.
Okay, I think I would like to, before I answer that question, maybe I would just like to talk about, we have this really hybrid model, like due to a lot of sentiments and all, like we put by, and that's bad. The government has decided in such a way that because they will pressure from a lot of quarters, you know, as consumers, they want pharmaceutical products to be at zero. It is actually very complicated to actually do GST that way. If you look at how other countries do, they make it very simple. It's one standard rate. They only zero rate may be very, very essential. If my colleague from customs, they said probably some countries like New Zealand and all, their zero rate is probably just what A4 size listing. Ours can pick up book. So it's actually very complex. But the reason why some sectors like health services and the education, they're exempt because I think when I listen to my custom colleagues, they said that because if first thing is because those are the essential sectors like the health services and education, whereby they don't want GST to be imposed. And there's also for health services, they have issues of specialist service all along the sector. So they also want to do away with duplicating imposition of GST. But I think that one there were some issues between the specialists and the health service specialist center and all. I think that was resolved by custom towards the end before GST was implemented. But I cannot deny that it will definitely have a pass-through in terms of cost. They can't charge GST, they cannot impose GST because the exempts are right. But they again also they can't claim the input tax. So that by itself will definitely contribute to price increase because they cannot absorb. But then, I mean, probably I shouldn't say it, but then when you hear the buying in, that picture was not clearly put across because I think at that point of time they were trying to pacify the consumers. So this very regularly used we call buying in will say that, oh, they are all exempt supply, no GST. GST dikecualikan. Betul lah? GST dikecualikan is correct, it's not wrong. But then we are only giving them half coke, you know, the other half of the picture. We didn't tell them that the other half that's upstream, there will be a cost pass-through. But we know as enforcement, we know, because we know the model is such. So what the formula that profiteering will do is, as long as it is within the cost that is going to be incurred by the businesses, then the pass-through should be as much on the amount as, or rather the quantum of the cost being incurred by businesses due to GST can be passed through. If more than that, then it becomes profiteering. If you look at the formula that we have put in for them to look at, but we can work towards that direction. So these are some of the ways that we try and control the price increase. Everybody here must understand that if you look at any countries that impose or implement GST, there's a one-off price increase. That is something which no country will deny. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's always a one-off. So, but this, the other thing is the health services. The other thing is MOF, when I sit with them, there's always this explanation. He said, health services and the private health services, only the rich will be affected. He said the normal layman will go to the general, the government hospital. But then I think that is not justified, I guess. I guess a lot of people now actually they can't get to government hospitals facility. They actually do have to foot out and go to private hospitals. So that's the situation that we have. But I can't comment because it's actually a policy decision. It's a policy decision. They have studied it as a whole. Why you put this in zero? Why you put standard and all?
Can you try and help? Okay, let me try and add on to this. If you look at the kind of industry that's exempted, these are like financial institutions. Let's say, for example, if you take a loan, if you're going to pay installment, imagine an installment now you have to add on a 6%. There's a lot of negative connotation that comes with it. The cost actually will actually goes up tremendously. Insurance premium, if they're going to allow companies to charge you 6%, then of course it's going to actually cost much more the inflation and so on. So even like residential properties, if you're going to buy a residential property, a million, then you have to add on another 6% on your purchase price. That's going to be a tremendous burden on the rakyat. So that's why they have this sort of category that put exempt, so they do not allow people to charge, in the hope that the price will stay low without that 6% imposed on it. Remember, you are a consumer, you cannot claim back. So if they allow them to charge you 6%, all these prices will actually go up skyrocket. Okay? No doubt, the cost of doing business for this industry will also go up because they can't claim. But it will not be as high as what that 6% should be. Because if you look at a property, the property, most of it is actually land cost. Land cost has got no, unless you transact, got 6%. Labor has got no 6%. Only a material cost, which constitute about 30-40% of the property price, will have the 6%. So the net cost increase for a property developer is about 3 or 4%, which then they hope the property developer will absorb that part of it because it's an exempt category. But like all Malaysian, is passed on through price increase, unfortunately.
That's the point that I'm saying.
Yeah.
By right, if they are being put under the zero-rated category, then everything will be solved. The price will not be increased, the property developer will not have any further on the cost, everything.
I think we all like everything to be in zero-rated category, right? But the fact of the case is, if you put everything in zero-rated, then there's no point in implementing GST, right? There's no revenue for a company.
Because my opinion is that in order for you to be under exempt supply, by right, this is the category that they are willing to absorb their price, absorb their cost in order to stay competitive. That's one of the reasons that I think should be the reason. But then in what you are saying, like the Malaysian companies are most likely not doing that. So eventually
I think it's become a norm. Like I say, GST over time, we accept that it's going to be part and parcel of life. We will pay for it. So for this type of category, you just put yourself in the position of you buying a property. If you're going to walk into a showroom and say, I'm going to buy my first house, $1 million, and this guy say, I'm going to charge you 6% because I have to charge you 6%. So it's $1,060,000. That's an additional 60,000 on you as a consumer. So as such, if you put it as exempt, then it's not so negative in that sense. The cost wouldn't be so much from there.
I think the other thing is maybe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the health services, I mean this one you mentioned about equipment, they have also worked in this mechanism whereby for health services they also give exemption on a lot of, equipments that are supplied to the health services. So by doing that, they're trying to neutralize and make sure that health services or maybe they don't go up that much. So that means there's some absorption of costs, down. I think at this point, to be honest with you, when I'm dealing with the retailers, the big retailers, a lot of them actually maintain their prices despite having to charge that 6% GST. Remember, you do see these issues. We are dealing with some companies whereby they wrongly, not bad intention, they wrongly said, are we absorbing the GST? We had an argument a little bit today also in the office, whereby it's actually wrong to say they absorb GST because you and I pay GST, whichever way. When we walk in now, there's a standard rated item, I have to pay a 6% GST. But some of them work it as such that they do not raise their present selling price. So they factor in the GST into the selling price. So we still pay our 6%, they still remit it to the government, but they lower a bit their margin, in order to maintain prices. So that's a good sign actually. If they're willing to do that, that means they're looking at them trying not to factor in GST because they feel that there's this thing called competition, that if their price are not competitive, they lose out the market. And now I think economy-wise, I think everybody is trying to get a piece of the economy at least, in terms of purchasing and all. Everybody probably has slowed down a bit in the first month, I'm not sure, because there was a buying spree right before GST. So we foresee maybe in April, it will dampen, the buying, the purchasing. So I guess all this they are trying to attract and also to make sure that consumers will continue to buy. If not, it will also affect the economy. So it's a good sign in that way. I'm not sure, maybe if you are a regular user, that's why I say if you are a consumer, you should know whether prices have increased or not. If you do your regular marketing, you have your loyalty to certain brand, you should know. You should know better. So if you find that there is a price increase that is sort of unreasonable, then by all means just forward the information. We are doing our part in terms of going to look at the big companies, especially the consumer goods related suppliers and manufacturers. We are concentrating on that especially. So these are the things that should come back to us as you as consumer. You also can channel into us. We have quite a lot of channels that you can use. Recently, I don't know whether any of you have tried that MyKira GST. Try and upload it. It's an application. Look at MyKira GST, go. Maybe there's the price checking that you can do. Benchmark it against that. Then maybe you can look at it as good consumers.
Pre-GST, I mean, there have been a lot of debates among all these tax experts and all that. They already PM government saying that we have too many items which is zero rated, exempted. Eventually create confusion, and it did happen, a big confusion right now. So what kind of measurement the government is taking to prevent this from happening and all that? And then it is create a lot of confusion for especially retailers and all that. Item, how to identify, and some of the in fact some of the shops that I know, they actually absorbing GST like what Mr. Choo has explained, because they do not know, they feel very confused which item is GST exempted and all that, what kind of category, and then in order to meet the deadline to implement it, okay, they maintain the price and for the time being, and then monitor subsequently, but until today they still complain.
Okay, I think we have to understand when it comes to pricing at the retail level. You're all talking about retailers at present. It is the threshold that determines whether they're registered or not registered. So if you're not a registered person, if you're a small retailer, then there's no issue of them imposing GST because it will be an offense. They cannot impose GST if they're not registered. In that sense, their pricing would be normal, and if they do raise their prices, then it has to be, let's say, it shouldn't be more than 6%. That should be the baseline that we would like to use. Because if I have something that was supplied to me before that has no GST, rather there is maybe sales tax but embedded, even the retailers doesn't know. The retailers don't pay sales tax. Sales tax is only at the distributor level, from manufacturer to distributor. So the retailers actually doesn't know. So now what the retailers do is, I receive my supply with an extra 6%. So rightfully, I can actually price it according to that cost. So for small retailers, it's acceptable and it's provided for under the regulation, because we cannot penalize them for having to absorb that 6%, right? So they can factor that as their cost. But in terms of price display, we know that there was some confusion when we started in April. There have been a lot of advocacy going on actually for a year, 2 years, right before GST. But you find like small retailers, being small retailers, they are not there. You know, they don't really pay much attention until when it's imposed. So we actually gave retailers like 14 days to try and reprice, but Leonard was trying to tell us that what to do to how many SKUs? 21,000. You know, the hypermarket got 150,000 SKUs. So they requested for 2 months. We said no. We were very strict. We said we give you 2 weeks. You just do it. You can't do it before 1st April, because if you do it before 1st April, you're going to impose GST on customers. So we negotiated for quite some time. They said we only give you 2 weeks. So they actually did. But the small retailers, we weren't going too hard on them, you see, because there were too many anyway. I don't think we were there all the time. So I guess eventually now they have repriced, but if they have increased their prices, it hasn't gone way beyond like 10% of what they're selling now. I think it's fair. I think it's fair if they're receiving it. But if there's no if the consumers are not satisfied, the only thing that we can tell them is come back to us. We will do a check on them if we find that you complain to us. We do our regular checking as well. So these are the things that we try and do. But now, if you go to the hypermarkets, they actually indicate 0 rated goods. Okay? If the goods are 0 rated, you'll find that it's on the shelf tagging. I cannot give you an outright answer on what are the things that is GST standard rate and exactly 0. If you look at the customs codes, I mean, none of us here can do it. Not even the enforcement officer from NDPCC, because it's so technical. So what we do is we also depend on customs to advise us in terms of the goods. Go to custom portal if you are not sure. We are still there. We are still very infant stage of GST. You will find that they have a sundry list and they're improving on the sundry list. It's only an indicator. So just look at it. Those are the items that is 0. So small businesses are also advised to go into all this for information. Small retailers, being small retailers, they're always slow in capturing all this.
I think you're right, there are a lot of confusion out there, and like you mentioned, if we keep the 0 rated list short, that's easier, right? But then we all want more things inside the 0 rated. I think the first round of draft, what are 0 rated, doesn't include things like newspaper, fruits, even kway teow, books, medicines, and so on. And it's because of this pressure that comes and say, please put more things inside the 0 rated, and therefore a 0 rated basket actually grown quite large. And you're right, there are confusion, and like I mentioned, it will take about a year or 2 for things to be settled down and before people start realizing. To assist, I think customs does come up with guidebooks and so on, even the application that you can download to check whether it's going to be 0 rated or exempt rated. Give you an example, like bread. You probably read in the newspaper that 7-Eleven charges 6% on wholemeal bread, right? Which is wrong. It's supposed to be 0 rated. But bread which has got raisins and nuts in it is standard rated. Like, how will people know if they don't go through a proper reading and so on? Right? And it's tough. If you go to hypermarket, 150,000 SKU, we do hypermarket 60,000 SKU, we need to sift through each and every one to try and identify which tax code it falls into. So yes, it's a learning process for everyone. Give yourself probably a year. Right? There will be mistake is made, which is why you need consultants. So please, I accept resume after this. Please come see us. You can see what you can do.
My first question is how CCN manage the cost of these operations, and also my second question is that on Facebook nowadays I started to see a lot of property agents advertise that we will absorb GST 6%. Okay, how enforcement going to do to check whether this claim is genuine?
The tax is actually purely on the value-added portion. We net off. We will claim that everything will be standard rated, okay, or at worst 0 rated, because we that we didn't want to get into exempt. And I said the problem with the pharmaceutical industry was prior to 1st of April, everything was, nothing attracted sales tax at all. So for the pharmaceutical industry, there is an increase of cost that would be passed on, especially the standard rated items, because previously when you were buying the medication, there was no tax, there was no import duty, there was no sales tax, etc. So what is happening is they put a lot of products under zero rated, okay, so you don't actually feel, but that will eventually translate into pass-through costs. And then they had the standard rated. Standard rated makes no difference to us because, you know, basically we get the benefit on the tax side, our income tax. So yes, we have an exposure on our value add, but we also have a reduction on the corporate tax side that helps us balance things out. That's why I say I think in year one, we'll probably be reasonably neutral. The issue that we're finding is in relation to services that attracted service tax previously. Our argument has always been, previously, let's take media services, they were charging us, or legal services, charging us 10% service tax. 6%, yeah, 6%. So theoretically, there should be no change. Okay, if anything, if they are buying services and then charging us, their services should actually come down in cost. So what we've done, for imported raw material, no big issue, we don't negotiate. But for a lot of service providers that are based in Malaysia, we've actually negotiated with them on reduction in prices post-GST, so that we don't actually have to pass it on as well. So we found that, I think at the moment, our net impact is about 2.5% to 3%. Okay? And to be quite honest, as a manufacturer, if you can't save 3% in your cost of production, something's really wrong. That's why I say I don't personally see there to be an impact. But for the consumer side, you're going to find some strange pricing mechanisms happening in the market. Like I said, you know, one strength of medication will be zero rated, another strength will suddenly find that, and you know, you can laugh about it, but what happens if somebody is on a prescription of 750 mg? 500 mg is exempt, 750 is standard rated. The guy will find it's better for me to buy 2 tablets of 500 as opposed to buy 750, okay? And then you will get abuse. That's the problem. So this is one of the reasons why we were hoping to make it easy, everything will be standard rated. But it would have meant an increase in cost for consumers, especially when we talk about healthcare. It's a very sensitive subject. So in the zero rated list for the Ministry of Health, at least on pharmaceuticals, are based on what they consider to be the essential product list. I mean, there's a list of products that seem to be essential, and it's a list that they basically get from the World Health Organization as well. So there is a basis for the zero rated. It's just very complicated for us that some products zero rated, some standard, supply to government, even though it's a standard rated, I cannot pass through it becomes zero rated when the government's my customer. It's a standard rated when a pharmacy or GP is the customer, etc. Now, because bear in mind as well, sometimes for us in the private sector, I can't talk to another manufacturer to get help because it might be defined as collusion. Okay, this is the anti-profiteering is only one act. You've also got the Anti-Competition Act, etc. Now what has happened, I've noticed that some industry associations that wanted to help its members in order to create a price list, that would be very, very close to touching upon the Anti-Competition Act. So as a result, even the industry associations were having difficulty talking to its members about pricing strategies as well. So unfortunately, but that's the reality of the situation globally. Like you've got anti-competition, anti-profiteering, anti all sorts of things. So, but that's roughly how we managed it.
I think the question of absorbing GST, like I say, generally the ministry does not condone the usage of that absorbing GST because basically it doesn't take place in GST because absorbing means consumers are not paying. Okay, if I say I'm absorbing, then you don't have to pay, right? So that practically is a misleading indication for us, but it's not something that we take directly under our present price control and anti-profiteering law, but it goes under the Trade Descriptions Act as misleading indication. But you're talking about going viral, then this thing might have to be like forwarded as complaint, because we actually can't reach every single misleading advertisement. It's probably what comes into our radar would be something that we can actually find. Sometimes within the enforcement circle, our own officers detected it, and then you know, now we have WhatsApp review, is quite convenient for everybody to get everything, so they shoot pictures of it, and then we actually go down to take action and then see what's actually situation on the ground. But you see that there are a lot of developers doing that as advertisement to try and get people to come in to buy and all, to attract purchaser. Then you have to actually forward it to us for action. It is a wrong statement for them to say absorbing GST. It's wrong.
But sorry, maybe I could just add one thing. I think small retailers will have a problem. There's no doubt about it. The moment you have standard 0, you're going to have a problem because of the number of SKUs. The other industry I think is already having a problem will be the hardware industry. You try to walk into a hardware shop and then try to explain why a nail or a screw made from a particular material is 0 rated, but made from another material will be subject to standard rated. And you look at the number of items they have. But to say that the small retailers don't entirely understand is not entirely correct either. I can tell you that about a month ago, I go to the stall in Desa Pandan, and it's a very popular store. And it started off as 1 stall and has now grown to 6 stalls. Okay, and they connected all these stalls, and it's like nasi kidang. They serve all the dishes. But a month ago, I noticed her the owner's lady, breaking up the stalls. Okay, immediately I knew what her revenue numbers were roughly. Okay, because she was trying to get her into 6 separate stalls, so she could come below the 500,000 threshold. So you knew her revenue was exceeding 3 million. For a store operator, pretty cool. So, you know, I mean, some people understand it better. Some people, I think, because remember, GST has been around for many, many years. But nobody had the guts to go ahead and implement it. I think from the civil servants' perspective, they have been recommending over and over to the political parties that GST was a fairer tax system. It's only now, after I think somebody said outside of Myanmar and what was it? Brunei, Myanmar and Laos were the last country to actually implement GST. Even Maldives, I don't know how many of you have been to Maldives, implemented it 5 years ago. I was shocked when I was talking to the ambassador. 5 years ago, even a country as small as Maldives implemented GST. So, but you know, sometimes you try to get a policy that's perfect. The more perfect you make it, the more imperfect it becomes. And that's partially why you find a lot of, my personal view, a lot of rubbish floating around Facebook, etc. But to me, it's a question on whether you can have an intellectual discourse about GST, which I think is possible, or you can have an emotional discourse about it, which is what I tend to see about GST.
The next country that is going to implement GST is actually India on 1st of April next year. So what you learn this year, you can go to India to practice your craft.
No, he's not He said to India this year.
Okay guys, in the interest of time, we kind of finished it 20 minutes over, so I do apologize. Having said that, I would like to thank all our panels. You will give them a round of applause, please. And I would like to thank all our audiences which actually came here today. Highest sense of gratitude. Thank you so much. If there's any questions, you can come down and ask.